Right now, there was Bitcoin, which is slow as balls. Then Ethereum, which was still sort of slow, but offered like the ability to become programmable, and then sort of moved on from there. We got L2s to go solve the Ethereum like transaction speed problem, and then we have all kinds of novel systems which are less and less decentralized, but more and more practical. So
This episode is brought to you by Trezor. Trezor makes beautifully crafted hardware wallets that make it easy for you to safely store your cryptocurrencies. I'm a big believer in self-custody. I've been using hardware wallets for years, and Trezor was the pioneer of hardware wallets, and they started this journey in 2013. Their hardware wallets are open source, and they support a variety of tokens, from Bitcoin to the top altcoins and even new coins such as BlackRock's BIDL. And I'm personally a user of the Trezor Safe 5. It's a beautiful device and easy to use. And Trezor offers a hand-holding service where they can help you onboard and set up your device so you can speak directly to a Trezor representative who can hold your hand through the process. And if you use the code ThinkingCrypto, all one word, you can get 5% off your purchase of a Trezor device. So to learn more about Trezor and all their great devices and services, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me today is Bayley Wang, who's the co-founder and CEO of PrismaX. Bayley, great to have you.
it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Bayley, I'm really excited to speak with you and learn about what you and the folks at PrismaX are doing with robotics and AI. And of course, there's the convergence with blockchain and crypto. But let's kick it off with your background. Tell us about yourself, your time at MIT, and your professional background as well.
Yeah. So I've been a founder all my life. I was a robotics researcher at MIT for a long time. I worked on a robot called the MIT Mini Cheetah, and the Mini Cheetah was very influential in the industry because it got the cost of the hardware down about 100x and really enabled people to do things like focus on applications and use cases and software. But when push came to shove, there wasn't really enough automation to make the robots do anything useful at the time. So that project was retired. The researchers left, went and worked at other companies. So ultimately, that's what we want to solve. We want to PrismaX, we want to give these machines the intelligence they need to be able to interact with the real world, to be able to complete real tasks. And we think that crypto and blockchain are a great way to coordinate the tasks that need to happen to make this take off. I've also been involved in blockchain for quite some time now, since I mined my dollar bitcoins back in the early 2010s.
Wow.
I was one of those guys who went and spent 10 bitcoins on a pizza and felt really happy about it because it was free money, right? We used MIT's electricity to mine bitcoins and use the bitcoins to buy lunch. Felt great when we were poor undergrads. Now that those pizzas are worth $1 million, it's maybe a little less great, but that's why I've enjoyed crypto. Like through it all, the narratives have shifted. The industry has changed a lot. We've seen everything from selling plots of land in the metaverse to decentralized lending systems to and everything in between. And the one thing that's remained constant is that crypto has the ability to captivate and engage a million people in something completely new very, very, very quickly. Like literally overnight, over a week, you could have a million people be excited about what you're doing. And I think that's really important for emerging frontier technology like robotics, where we do need new ways of working with things. We do need new types of jobs, new types of interactions. And crypto is a way to get these people engaged and to coordinate what they're doing.
Bayley, that's amazing that you were mining Bitcoin so early at a dollar.
Yeah,
That's incredible. Were you part of the MIT Crypto Club? I know they had formed that over the years.
Yeah. I was part of the original community. I saw the first rise of Bitcoin to $1,300 a coin. $100,000 Bitcoins were a pipe dream back then. We laughed about it,
Wow.
but no one thought it could happen. We were part of this thing called the experiment, where we gave a third of a Bitcoin to every MIT undergrad. When this prices slumped, we wanted to inject some life back into the ecosystem and see whether we could get any applications coming out of it.
Wow. This is going to sound like a weird question, and there's a lot of people who hate this guy, but Gary Gensler, former SEC chairman, he was teaching at MIT, I believe around 2018. Were you there? Did you attend any of his courses by any chance?
I was not there. In 18, I was still in Cambridge, but I was more on the robotics side at that point.
Got it. Okay. I had to ask because that's a
Yeah.
big controversial time. Gensler in the last under the Biden, they had attacked crypto, and at one
Yeah.
point he was teaching about it at MIT. So it's just a weird change that took place, but I guess it was all politically driven.
Politics is a weird thing.
So, Billy, I really want to get your perspective as an entrepreneur and a builder on kind of the future economy, right? You have all these technologies converging, AI, robotics, EV, space exploration is booming. You have crypto and blockchain. And it seems like this is an industrial revolution that we're part of, the fourth. And these technologies are converting and they kind of have a symbiotic relationship where, as you mentioned, like I don't foresee robots transacting in cash, but maybe with stablecoins, and they're running on blockchain networks to power the data that they need.
Yeah. I think you put it nicely, right? It's a new industrial revolution. And with these revolutions, they're not bad. They don't displace people, but they make people change what they do and how they work. And I think that's important for robotics. One of the core beliefs we have at PrismaX is that in the future economy, people will work new roles alongside robots rather than being displaced by the robots. There's clearly things humans are good at. Like we have a lot of experiences. We can be responsible for our own actions. We are really good at this sort of external environmental perception and decision making that's really hard for computers to do. And but ultimately the robots are also great because it means that these people no longer have to be in dangerous positions lifting heavy objects. They can do what they're actually good at, which is sit in a control room making controlling the robots and making sure the robots are behaving properly. And these machines, which are, they're good at outputting high amounts of force and working 24/7, they're the ones who are out in the field actually doing the physical labor. And we see that as a really good relationship. Like it's very positive, right? Like no one actually says I enjoy cleaning sewers or hammering nails into 2x4s. But if you can make the same amount of money or even more money controlling five robots that are doing the same thing, that's a huge win for everyone. And to your yeah,
Oh no, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
yeah, and to your point, I think that's where that's similar for things like blockchain, where we are sort of at the cusp of a transition in financial systems, where because information is more freely accessible, being able to have more decentralized financial systems is now a possibility and can be done safely and reliably, right? Like there were problems like 100 years ago where like you just didn't have access to enough information to be able to make decisions intelligently. But now with the blockchain, with everything being 100% transparent, with the internet, with data analytics tools, it's become a lot better. And I think that machine to machine transactions too are a really interesting aspect. There's clearly a space for machines to be able to rent time on other machines to complete more fleet oriented tasks. And that can only happen through blockchain. I don't think the traditional financial system is going to allow that kind of computerized transaction into the system. It's just their risk profile and how they make money is not aligned with what the system needs right now, which is speed and transparency and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm. And then also, is there this safety component that, look, you have these robots, they're going to be powered by a network where data is coming in. And look, we've seen the dystopian movies, right? With the dystopian scenario of these robots being taken control of. But blockchain, an encrypted network using cryptography, immutable, and all these things, could that help police the network, so to speak, because you're building on a better infrastructure versus, Web 2 infrastructure?
I think it's more that the actual humans that control the blockchain are much more diffused than with a centralized Web 2 infrastructure. So
Hmm.
you can't have a single bad actor make a bad decision, right? The whole point of blockchain is that it's unless 51% of the entire community believes that an action should be done, the chain should reject that state. And I think that's really important because it means rather than you could imagine a dystopian future, like the typical dystopian future is like the CEO of some evil ABC mega corporation decides to go bad and commands all of his lackeys to go bad, and there's like a wash and effect down the line. But it's much harder to attack with a decentralized system where even for like a modern stake-based validation system, you still have thousands of validators that all have to form a consensus. And convincing every 51% of those to follow your plans is very challenging, right? That's the whole underpinning behind modern networks.
Yeah. And I personally don't view the world as this dystopian thing, Terminator, iRobot. I view it more as the Jetsons. Like you said, there's going to be bad actors that has existed throughout time, right? And will continue because humans will be humans. But if my grandma could be helped by a robot where it's monitoring, doing the heavy lifting, if dangerous jobs are done by robots, and it can even free me up in my daily life to do things I want to do versus, okay, I don't need to go mow the grass, the robot can do it. Or, as a simple example, it just seems like it's going to open up more opportunities for us to do the things we love.
Right, right. I think the Terminator scenario was one that was unfortunately popularized like 3 decades ago by media that didn't quite understand the technology, and B, technology that didn't quite understand itself at the time either. Like robotics was mostly a pipe dream 30 years ago when Terminator came out, right?
Right.
So I don't really see, for a variety of reasons, I don't really see robots as being a physical safety hazard. Not the least of this, it's actually very easy to stop a robot,
Hmm.
especially like a modern dynamic humanoid robot, where if you cut the power, it just falls over. It's not like it would be a different scenario, I think, if we were deploying like huge autonomous forklifts rolling around to
Sure.
go move things around. There you would have a real safety issue if there was if there was like a security problem. But I think with modern compliant robotics, it's much less of an issue.
Now, before we continue the conversation, I want to make sure folks know what Prisma X is. Give us the overview, the history, and your mission.
Yeah, so our sort of long-term vision is to drive mainstream adoption of robotics by helping the industry scale the things that it has a lot of trouble scaling right now. More specifically, that means right now we provide things like a unified platform for robot teleoperation, mostly focused on data collection right now, but potentially real-world stuff as well. Scalable data filters for vision data collection, and things like guild ownership of robotics, which will help the hardware side of the picture scale. Ultimately, we see PrismaX as backing a lot of the man-machine interactions in the future, where you would go do things like remotely operate robots to complete tasks, be the guy who ensures that the robots are safe, coordinating a lot of the ownership, leasing, access mechanics behind robotics.
Interesting. So, we talked a bit earlier about jo certain jobs being taken over by robots that maybe are more dangerous to human beings and they can work around the clock. But do you see new jobs being created where people are going to have to fix these robots? There's the financialization, the leasing, the buying, and all that jazz. What do you see as far as jobs being created out of the robot industry?
I think like the actual hardware maintenance will be no different than existing equipment leasing, but there's going to be a lot more of it. It's going to exist at a 2 orders of magnitude higher scale than existing leasable equipment, which is going to require the creation of new structures in order to manage these things, right? You can go manage 1 million bulldozers, but 100 million robots is a whole different picture.
Yeah.
Beyond that, the real position we see being created is this idea of the human behind the robot who drives the machine, but he doesn't have to drive the machine 100% of the time. The robot drives itself 90% of the time, but 10% of the time, someone needs to come in and make sure that the robot's doing its job or do a spot check. And if you do the math, if there's 1 billion robots or even 100 million robots, we're talking millions to tens of millions of positions being created. And ultimately, we think that's where a lot of the existing sort of like gig worker demographic, I would say, like people who right now make money doing repetitive tasks, will eventually be able to occupy themselves. And it's a much better use of humans as well, because as I said earlier, people are good at making decisions and learning about the environment. People are actually quite bad at doing things like lifting heavy items. Like we're not built for that kind of work.
Yeah, and it seems like we're in this transition period away from that, right? And the old industrial revolution, the old way of doing things. And look, we needed to do it is what it is. We had to do it at that point because the technology wasn't there. Um, but it's like this brave new world where you have AI as like this virtual assistant that give you knowledge, point you, give you ideas, and then you have the physical component of the robots to help execute some of it. And you, as a human being, you get freed up to like I said, do more things that you love. Maybe I don't have to spend all day doing maintenance on my yard or my house or whatever it is. I know it's a very simplistic example, but I can go fishing or I can go work
Yeah,
out
yeah.
longer, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, drawing an analogy with the existing Gen AI, right? There's like a lot of concern, especially like AI content generation is going to displace a lot of jobs. But
Mm.
the top content creators are like really jumping on the AI because it means they can spend more time being creative and less time and money doing things like correcting the color in their videos
Yeah.
or masking out objects. Like it's a powerful tool for people who right now are already ahead of the curve to do better. And what that means is that the whole curve gets pulled up, right? You've displaced the bottom, and now in order to continue to compete, everyone has to move up, and that ultimately that makes people better at what they do. And it's happened in every industrial revolution. The first industrial revolution took us from subsistence farming on like planting corn and wheat to manufacturing goods. Then sort of like the information revolution moved people away from doing small manual tasks into doing things like more service oriented things. And overall, like in the long run, that was we look back on that happily. Like everyone is very happy that 10% of the population doesn't sit in a room for 14 hours knitting socks,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is just it was not a good world, right? Like everyone agrees that was a bad world,
Yeah.
and we're happy to be out of it. And I think it's gonna be the same thing. You're not gonna have people going and like manually masking things out in Photoshop or in robotics, like flipping burgers or mowing lawns, and they're gonna be going off and doing something new.
Absolutely. And then when you throw into the mix the next frontier, so to speak, which is space, we see SpaceX and all these companies, right? Virgin Galactic. So everybody's trying to build the best rockets, do space flights, and then Elon's trying to colonize Mars. I can't imagine they're going to send humans first. They're going to send robots, right?
Yeah, and that I think is a big hidden gem in robotics. Having robots do things which are completely impossible for humans. There's like a whole lot of business considerations you have to think about, right? Like, what is the commercial value of being on Mars? How can we get to Mars? Launching the robot to Mars is very annoying. It's a lot of mass to put on Mars, but I think it's an active field of research which more companies should go explore.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't even have to send a ton of robots. I mean, if you send three, that's still because they don't have to sleep or eat and breathe. That's
Yeah,
still
yeah.
it's probably the equivalent of what, of 50 human beings? I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't need spacesuits. They can roam more freely. Like a person in a spacesuit is not a very dexterous thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
and the problem with robots on Mars has always been the like few minutes of latency between the Earth and Mars. Like the speed of light is finite, so it's a little bit troublesome, and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that.
Oh, absolutely. Now tell us how Prisma X is executing on robotics. Are you building the actual physical robots? I saw on the website the fleet. Tell us a bit about that.
We do not build physical robots beyond what's absolutely necessary to kickstart the platform. We partner with external robotics companies. Ultimately, one of our short-term, midterm visions is to drive a little bit more standardization in the robotics industry in order to make it easier to build applications. When you have 3 dozen different types of robot, each with their own quirks, it's hard to decide what to do. But by pushing the platform and the data and the operators to be skilled on a few embodiments which we think are the best embodiments of that class, we can make things a little more efficient. So we do offer some robot access right now, and as the platform grows, there will be more access and more community-owned robots which will be made available through the platform for everything from data collection to task completion. Like there's like if you like in not too long, I think if you want a humanoid robot to come mow your lawn, there will be potential to go on the platform and try to hire a humanoid and find an operator to mow your lawn. Whether the early platform and the early hardware will be efficient at actually getting the lawn mowed is a different question.
Sure.
But it's right. That's the nice thing about building something decentralized. The community gets to grow and discover what's valuable. Like we offer the tools to hire a robot, hire an operator, and make them do things. And what you want to build on top of that is up to you. Like it could be anything from collect data to mow your lawn to who knows what else. Put on a song, put on a show, which is probably going to be actually a big use case where you go hire a humanoid to stand in front of your restaurant and like wave around. Like people will come eat there just to look at the robot.
Yeah, it's man, like I said, a brave new world. It's so fascinating. It's exciting. Which blockchains or blockchain or blockchains are you using for to power your network?
It's still a bit TBD right now. We do a little bit of collaboration with some of the more prominent projects. The nice thing about the way the current ecosystem is set up is that you do have the potential to have different deployments of robots in different communities on different chains, depending on where the communities are, what they're interested in, and then use technological means to tie everything together.
Mm. And I know the future is interoperable. We're seeing a lot of folks issue stable coins and doing different things on multi-chain, right? Because
Yeah.
you have these chains that maybe have different swim lanes. Like an example would be Ethereum is more on the enterprise corporate level, Solana more in the retail meme coin NFT level, Bitcoin in its own lane, and some folks are targeting the sports industry. So maybe it makes sense to be on multiple blockchains and to you said targeting different communities.
Yeah, L1 differentiation right now is a very interesting thing. Like I've seen the entire industry well before the concept of L1, L2 was a thing. And that was bad because you needed to become a node to have a wallet. And right, like Coinbase's original product was a wallet where you didn't have to go download the entire chain in order to have a Bitcoin. And it moved on from there. So I think as the industry moves forwards, we're going to see more clarity in what the chains differentiate as. Right now, there was Bitcoin, which is slow as balls, then Ethereum, which was still sort of slow but offered like the ability to become programmable, and then sort of moved on from there. We got L2s to go solve the Ethereum like transaction speed problem, and then we have all kinds of novel systems which are less and less decentralized, but more and more practical. So we'll see where that grows in the end.
Hmm. Do you envision, let's say I buy a robot, right? 5 years from now, just an example. That robot would have a crypto wallet built in. It's powered on maybe multiple blockchains, where there's a primary blockchain, but it can do interoperable things with different blockchains. I tell it, hey, robot, whatever name I give it, can you go to Home Depot, get me this part, and it will go do that and it will pay because it has maybe a wallet that has stable coins. And because stablecoin legislation and crypto legislation is at the cusp of passing, it will all be, into the payment rails, the credit card companies and so forth. And that robot will come back with the product that I asked it to buy, and it would have executed a payment and everything.
Yeah, so that's actually interesting. I think that you will be able to buy a robot which contains some sort of credits, and those credits can be used for a variety of tasks, machine to machine, obviously the robot completing tasks, the robot making some sort of external transactions. And it's up to the world and the regulators to decide whether those credits will be stable coins, which can be used to also pay for most real world services. I think there's a lot of potential with the new legislation because there's a lot of new services which MasterCard, Visa, Discover refuse to touch. Like fundamentally, the value of the stable coin like well, obviously one thing is international transactions, which are just sort of bad right now. Like the financial system was not set up for high speed international transactions. But the other one is being able to do things which the three big credit card processors and the merchant banks are uncomfortable doing because of chargebacks and risk. And I think robotics is one of them. But maybe like, if things don't go well, you're just gonna prepay for API credits, which will be usable. They'll be like Uber bucks or whatever, which will be usable at select stores. But I think I and everyone else really hope that it'll be a lot more universal in terms of adoption. And I think Stripe moving in that direction really helps because they're a big backend processor for a lot of SMBs. like Stripe won't process for big shops like Home Depot, but for stuff like, hey, can you go buy me breakfast from this my favorite restaurant? That guy probably uses a Stripe terminal to go do their processing. So
Mm.
that kind of integration will really help. The key I think there is to go hide the crypto side from the merchants. Like the merchants have no business learning or understanding that there's cryptography, right? It's just another payment system and it's secure. Like no one knows how Swift or credit cards work. Well, people who build the systems do, but like in general, like when you process a credit card payment, you don't know what happens behind the
Right.
scenes, but you don't need to. It's just another way to eventually you get dollars.
Exactly. And often people ask me, okay, what's the purpose of blockchain and crypto and stable coins, right? Because they don't know, like to your point, how money is settled, what happens behind the scenes. And look, a lot of people don't want to know how the sausage is made, but once they understand the crux of the issue of Swift and the days it takes to settle and it's
Right,
just a
right.
messaging, this technology solves all of that, makes it more efficient, faster, and you can lower fees as a result.
Right. Exactly, right. There's like a lot of moving bits when you swipe your card at a restaurant. It like there's a merchant bank, an ACH settlement system, your bank, and there's just a lot of moving parts that are really inefficient. And the different parts of the stack all disagree as to what they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. Does your platform allow for the creation of tokens, or is that not necessary?
Yeah. So right now we're going through a point system for some of the early interactions, but eventually we're going to have a native token.
Mm. And I know you mentioned you're still trying to figure out, which direction you go. Are you going to build your own layer one, or are you going to build layer two, like on ETH or something like that?
It will probably start as an L2, probably not ETH, probably Solana or one of the newer chains with a bigger community. Like the ETH community has a very well defined set of features right now, which is mostly focused on technology development and, as you said, enterprise use cases, which
Mm.
is not a super good fit, I think, for the more community oriented transactional stuff that we're doing. Like I love Ethereum. Like Ethereum, they're great guys. They really got us where we are. They do a lot of amazing research,
Mm.
but they have their every chain has its own personality. To your point, right? Like really, that's what differentiates the chains. It's not the technology or the settlement speeds or the validation scheme or the security. It really is the people who have gathered around each chain, and that gives them different personalities.
Mm.
And for us, I think it's because we're doing for now we're doing a lot of more offline transaction settlement. Things like transaction processing speeds are a bit less important to us than if we were, say, doing real-time payments where you actually need like sub-second settlement worst case for everything.
Mm. Man, it's just I go into deep thought sometimes thinking about all these things with robots and blockchain and how it's all going to work. Now you guys recently raised $11 million from A16Z, and we know Andreessen Horowitz. They are big time believers in tech. They have been since the 90s,
Yeah,
investing in
yeah.
crypto as well. Tell us about that fundraise.
Yeah. So, and A16Z is a great fund for a project like ours because they're very plugged into the frontier of every piece of technology, and that includes robotics as well. But by virtue of being A16Z, they've interacted with many robotics startups. They have a good pulse on what the industry is going to grow, and they just really immediately saw value in what we're doing. Like behind robotics, there's a huge set of human coordination and human services that are needed in order to make the industry take off. And hence the investment.
Mm, yeah, and I often watch their portfolio to see what they're investing in because it's also uh, it's kind of like showing where the direction the puck is heading in, so to speak.
Yeah.
They were early to obviously the Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and now 3.0, and then you got these other technologies. So Billy, I wanted to circle back to the impact of robotics on society and the economy and so forth. What if someone came up to you and said, "Okay, Billy, I've seen all these movies, Terminator and so forth, and if you wanted to play devil's advocate, what would you say are some of the potential risks?" And once again, every technology brings risks with it, so I want to make sure we give the nuance there.
Yeah. I think an interesting thing, which I expect to see a bit of case law soon, is if a teleoperated robot makes a mistake,
Mm,
who's liable? The
mm,
operator or the operator or the manufacturer of the robot? To me, it's clearly the operator, but it gets a little more nuanced if the operators are being like hired through a platform service, right? Like say you hired an operator through TaskRabbit, which is what a lot of companies do now. Who's responsible for the operator's actions?
mm.
And you know as well as I do that once robots take off, there's going to be like some incident where a robot is teleoperated and goes and like clubs someone in the head, and there's like a big ruckus around it. It's
Yeah,
not going to be a huge issue, I think, because in general, society is not full of people clubbing each other on the head. Like
right,
even in the absence of punishment, it's just not beneficial for you to go like get in a fight with people. It's a lot of risk, and there's no guarantee you're going to win that fight.
right.
So I don't think I don't think it's natural for people to go do that kind of stuff, but there will be isolated incidents, and we're going to have some sort of legislation around it, I think. Um, and decentralization helps there because it makes people individually responsible for their own actions. Like it's there's no like central hiring agency, so there's less of a target, and you can build up the network. Obviously, like if people misbehave, they're no longer welcome on the network.
Mm. And then with these different robots, right? And you have different AIs, you got your chat GPTs and much more, and all these AI agents that are going to be created. What category, if I'm phrasing that right, would of AI would power these robots to help them do what they need to do?
They're a new emergent class of model. They internally look a little bit like the large language models that power ChatGPT, but they learn how to plan actions in a very abstract mathematical space. They like understand the concept of moving your arm to the left and then picking up an object, but they do so without explicitly writing that down. They're just numbers which describe the concepts of leftness, armness, and picking upness. So the model will go learn those, and then finally, different hardware vendors will go adapt those backbones to their own hardware.
Hmm.
Is the current paradigm, and I think it's here. I think it's here to. I think it's here to stay. I think that's a good approach.
And in addition to the physical aspect of helping human beings to execute different tasks and saving us time and, like I said, freeing us up to do what we want, can these robots also be a companion and smart enough to have a conversation like we are right now? Where, once again, I give the example of my grandma, um, that the robot's there and she can ask it questions, can ask it to make a phone call. She can say, "Hey, can you remind me when is this happening? Can you put this on the calendar?" And it can have that interaction.
Yeah, the helpful companion has been a vision of a lot of even the software only companies without the hardware embodiment. And I would say the biggest challenge there is this idea of talking, like building an AI system where you can interrupt it halfway and
Mm.
it knows how to respond properly. If you've ever tried to like speak to an LLM, like not like chat with one, but like actually talk with one. It's very unnatural because you have to finish, pause, and wait for the model to respond.
Yeah.
And if you then interrupt the model as it responds, it just like really goes south from there. Like it doesn't really know how to handle injecting outputs as injecting additional input as it generates its output. And I think it's a problem that it's a whole can of worms that I think is also ripe for decentralization, where you could go collect the training data needed to train this kind of interaction. So, like, if anyone's listening, I think it would be a helpful thing for the industry to be able to really train that model. Because right now, there just isn't enough conversational data to do the training right now. Like, the technology is there, but the training data isn't.
This is a bit dystopian and gets into kind of the liability aspect. Let's say these robots have the guardrails in place. You cannot attack a human, you can't hurt a human. What if I tell my robot to go attack my neighbor's robot? How do we stop that?
It'll be resolved through the traditional legal system where if you go like break your neighbor's possessions, you have to pay for them.
Mm,
Like what stops you from like taking a hammer to your neighbor's car, right? The answer is you have to pay for his car plus like triple damages, so you're
right.
not going to do it. And as I said, I don't think humans are like society seems to have bred a human which is not like naturally conflict seeking, at least in at
Right.
like 99% of humans are not conflict seeking.
Right.
And the bad actors can be dealt with through the traditional means. Like fundamentally, a robot is a tool, and using a robot to hurt someone or using a robot to damage someone is like if you're in control, that's no different at all from using a hammer to go beat your neighbor on the head. Like it's punished by the same mechanics. And the thing which guards you from doing that is like society and penalties, not the fact that clubbing your neighbor with a hammer is difficult.
Right. And then also I'm assuming the robots are going to have kind of what a black box like airplanes do. It's going to record all of these things, so the evidence is there, and it actually be something you don't want to do if you're trying to do something nefarious and keep it a secret.
Yeah, yeah. Like if I think it's pretty clear that if you personally own it's your robot and it goes and does something bad, it's your problem regardless of how it happened. Like you're the it's the same way like if you own a knife and it gets used for something bad, or you own a gun and it gets used for something bad, you'll get looked at, and especially if you're the one behind the knife or the trigger, right? And I think it's the same thing for machines. Like the robots are just tools in the end, and they have a little more autonomy, but you're still like the people are still responsible for the actions the machines take.
Hmm. Billy, hard question. What's your best guess as to the timeline when we are going to see robots in our homes? Is it 10 years from now? More than that?
Yeah, I think 10 years is a good estimate for when you'll really see them in your homes as something that you can go buy off the shelf and be reliable enough and comfortable enough to work with. There's a bunch of software problems that need to be solved along the way, and probably some hardware problems as well. Definitely I would say like social acceptance is also one that we need to step into. We can't just drop robots in everyone's houses. Call me maybe a pessimist. There's at least one prominently venture funded company that said that we'd have robots in your home last December. The robots currently aren't in your house right now, so that's how it's shaping up.
Do you think it might actually start in the business sector first, right? Amazon's warehouse and whatever before it even makes it to our homes?
Absolutely. And for deep scalable stuff like Amazon's warehouses, I think we're going to see automation happen very soon because they can go rebuild the entire warehouse in order to make the machines fit and reap the 10-year returns on that investment. Like they have the money to do so. I think where you're going to see the first deployments of what I call advanced robots, like modern robots with complicated actuators, is in small to medium businesses, like things like corner stores, convenience stores, maybe grocery, maybe restaurant backend to some extent, but there's a lot of like human interaction there, so maybe not as much. I think that's where you're going to see the first deployments where it's complicated enough of a scenario to justify a modern robot, but straightforward enough and sort of enclaved enough that you can deal with some of the reliability issues early on. And then we're going to move on from there. Once again, there are a few highly opinionated companies that will definitely tell you differently, but that's sort of my take on the situation right now. And I think it's the realistic way for things to grow.
For sure. The other component to this is energy, right? And maybe that's kind of solved because we have car batteries and the alternators that keep powering it, and you could charge your vacuum, you can charge this and device and that device now. But what do you think the initial lifespan of a battery in the robot would last? And is it just a home charger that it just goes and stands and plugs itself in?
I think it's going to be around 2 hours, maybe 3 hours for the first robots. So you're going to need some sort of fast charging technology to really get it to take off. Batteries are a tricky thing. I did a stint as like a sort of traction like electrification engineer some time ago, and there's really a lot of laws of physics that make it hard to make the battery two times better than what it is now. And that puts a lot of like there's a lot of hard physical laws, and we're like getting pretty close to the optimum, I think, for actuation and battery and power draw. And I think we can recover some of the battery life problems by changing the form factor. Like if you accept that the robot doesn't have legs, which I think is a great idea in the short to medium term, you can pack a lot more power. It becomes a lot more efficient in moving itself around, and you can maybe squeeze a day of battery life out of a reasonable machine. But it's engineering is a series of trade-offs, right? And who knows what will happen in the future? Like Probably batteries in the foreseeable future. Fuel cells, if you're still that kind of guy, like if you're still interested in hydrogen in 2025, which you get like a startup a year that tries to play that game.
Yeah. Man, it's just fascinating. I'm just thinking like I have a 7-year-old daughter. I have my wife, of course, and I'm just thinking, how would that robot fit in our home? Obviously, it'll get things done. It'll be productive, but how would my daughter interact with it? And would that be, helpful for her, where she can have some sort of companionship, not replacing us as parents, of course,
Yeah, yeah.
but she can ask it random questions, and I can ask it random questions, kind of like what I do with the Amazon Alexa or the Google Home and things like that, but get even more value.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of human interaction problems that people will need to think about once we're past the baseline of getting the robots to actually complete physical tasks. The
Mm.
whole like HCI aspect and the product experience are things which no one's thinking about right now. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there, especially for domestic robots.
Mm. And then I'm assuming you can choose a personality, right? If it's a male, female, and different things like that.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of it is companion chat and like interactive AI systems which talk like humans are they're a it's a interesting space, right? There's like a lot of things you can do. There's some good, some bad, and there's a lot of social risk of as well. There are a lot of people who actually don't understand they're talking to a machine, like people who aren't tech savvy, people who aren't so tech savvy and aren't plugged in. And I think it's going to be a bit of an issue once we have these machines to teach people that there isn't a human at the other end. Like it literally is a computer talking to you. Like context, hallucinations, long-term memory, these are all things that they align well with like the traditional text AI space.
I think you may have answered this, but I want to make sure I ask you this question. There's always the question of something becoming self-aware, AI, and so forth. Is it blockchain that will once again police that if something becomes self-aware and truly becomes autonomous? I don't know.
I think, oh man, the whole consciousness in AI systems is an interesting question. The way AI works right now is it's a statistical model of everything that's seen in the past. So it's very difficult for these systems to become conscious in the traditional sense. They do exhibit a lot of emergent behavior, and I think you're right that blockchain or some variant of it should be the tool that controls what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not because it fundamentally aligns with the community and its values rather than with the risk profile of a like $1 trillion technology company, which is obviously very limited in what it can do. And I think once you start once you start understanding the fact that these systems are going to be interacting with different cultures, some of which have vastly different beliefs from yours, it makes sense that the policing is done in a like more local way. The decisions are done more locally. And more specifically, I think it's the community will be able to select what data goes into the training splits of these models, and that really determines to a very large extent the personality of the resulting model and what it can do.
Hmm. Billy, have you seen the movie Chappie by any chance?
Which movie?
Chappie.
I have not.
So in that movie, it's a world where robots exist, and the one of the robot engineers, he uploads his consciousness to the robot. Not super sci-fi stuff here, right?
Yeah, yeah,
However, I'm currently exploring, and some other creators are as well, creating an AI avatar of ourselves where it has learned my speaking patterns, my quirks, and a lot of my knowledge. So I upload a lot of my transcripts from my
yeah, yeah.
podcasts and so forth, right? So let's say I create that avatar, and eventually I upload that into a robot, and let's say I pass away one day, I'm of old age, but my grandkids want to have a version. This is kind of weird, but
Yeah,
I'm curious.
yeah.
But that AI avatar is in the robot, and they can have me around in that way.
It has been explored in the like non-embodied sense, this idea of a magic box that carries on your personality when you're gone or when you're not available. there's probably a solid market for it. Everyone, like, people do two things with certainty: we're born and we die. Everyone that lives dies, right? So your market's like the entire world. The social impact of that technology is curious.
Mm.
And right now, it's not widespread enough to go beyond science fiction. But I think there's going to be a lot of in like teaching people that it's really just a avatar and not something. It's not like the actual person, and it's not as capable of learning from new experiences as a human can. And I
Mm.
mean, there are ways around this. You can go like literally make the model learn from its new experiences, but no one's shipped that product yet. It's kind of expensive to ship.
Yeah, I mean, it's like weird, but it's also interesting at the same time because if you love somebody and you kind of want something of them around, let's say they pass away, at a very early age or whatever it may be, and you've seen the bits and pieces of this in movies, that could be very interesting, but also, like I said, socially, I don't know if we're ready for stuff like that.
Socially very strange, very, very strange.
Yeah. Okay, what's on your roadmap? What can we expect for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, so we're going to launch more on our platform very soon. There's going to be robots that people will be able to remotely drive. We're planning on scaling up the standard platform and a few standard embodiments that we really will be able to collect a lot of data on, and hopefully be able to show real progress on the frontier technology front through our partners, that being able to scale the data to rather than dozens of operators, hundreds or thousands of operators, really gives you like new magic in what these machines can do and help move the needle forwards. And as we say, move robots more into the mainstream by giving them the same kind of flexibility that the language models have.
Hmm. You were mining Bitcoin very early, so you're an OG. You've seen this asset class grow significantly, multiple cycles. What are you expecting as, crypto legislation comes into play? Are you expecting a lot of innovation, this industry to grow significantly?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. The generally like crypto friendly, and I would say that the current administration is just more friendly to advanced financial instruments than the previous administration, and that means you're going to see a lot more exposure and marketing and education about this new asset class. Stablecoins for sure are really useful because they do, like everyone agrees, stablecoins do have utility, and there's going to be a lot of investment around building new stablecoin driven platforms. But beyond that, we're going to get a lot of clarity on what differentiates securities from tokens. And I think that's going to encourage a lot of building in that space as well. Sort of like one of my, it's very much an opinion, but I think a lot of us would agree, right? Like we think it's good for people to be able to invest in new technologies more directly than they do now. Like there's a lot of frustration that OpenAI and NVIDIA and the OpenAI especially, right? They're a big private company. The people who work there are making billions of dollars off of their work, but you don't have any way to engage with this progress other than like having losing your job to the AI. So being able to let people participate earlier through tokens or through network incentives or through decentralization, I think is going to be a really good thing for sort of equalizing things and getting people more engaged in frontier technologies. Like once you have skin in the game, everything changes. Like I can guarantee you that if you had OpenAI shares, you would not say a single thing bad about OpenAI.
Hmm.
But there's like a lot of concern that like, oh, AI is going to displace jobs, and just like being able to interact with the development and the growth of the industry as a whole is really cool and really healthy for everyone. And as I said at the beginning, with in this modern information age where information is a lot more accessible, I think the world is ready for people to be like ordinary people to be able to participate in the frontier of technology development in whatever way they want. And like that's what we do. That's a lot of what the like AI plus crypto platforms do, right? Like you can contribute not necessarily through like writing Python code or building models, but like through data, through contributing your experiences or your chat logs. And that's your way to get a little bit of skin in the game. And when everything takes off, you'll benefit and you'll feel a lot better about it. Like you are part of the project. And I think that's really good. And I think ultimately the legislation that's shaping up is going to be really helpful in guiding companies, especially in the US, to offer more access to be able to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. Great perspective. And it's just fascinating, man. I'm so excited to see how all these technologies roll out. And like I said, I have a 7-year-old daughter, so I'm trying to educate her about all these things and
Right, right.
almost prep her, so to speak. Like this, the world is going to be very different. And obviously she'll find her way. But if I can, teach her a bit about robotics earlier, AI and all these things to give her an
Yeah, yeah,
advantage.
exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Bailey, I have some wrap-up questions here for you. First,
Yep.
if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
My own metaverse. That's interesting.
Would it
That's
be
very
robot themed?
interesting. Probably robot themed, probably sort of frontier tech themed. Metaverse is a interesting question right now, and I think there's a lot of potential for that space to come roaring back to life once people build more applications. The first attempt to build the metaverse was it didn't go very well. People were selling plots of land in video games that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And but I think the second time around we're gonna see honestly it would probably be like gaming theme, like
Mm.
recreating the incredible virtual worlds of the early MMO era. Like there were real communities that people really enjoyed based on in like World of Warcraft and RuneScape and all of these big decentralized MMOs. And by and large, they've gone by the wayside as people have switched to like esports type games. But I think there's potential for these things to make a comeback. Like people live their lives and like we're happier because of it in these virtual worlds.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, the first iteration, not great, but version 1.0 of anything is not great. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, as you get later
I,
versions,
I think there is potential. Like there's already precedent. Like there were in the early MMOs, like the in-game money was monetized, just not officially for like legal reasons. But like you could go buy in-game credits using real money, and there was like a whole economy of in-game items and communities. Like people built cities, and there were guilds, and like replicating all of that into the modern era, I think would be really freaking cool.
yeah, that would be awesome. All right, I got some rapid fire questions here for you. Favorite food,
Favorite food, probably some sort of sushi.
favorite musician or band?
Uh, None at the moment. It used to be Taylor Swift a few Taylor Swifts ago.
My daughter would be happy to hear that. Favorite movie,
Avengers Endgame.
favorite book.
That's a good question. I don't really have one at the moment. Asimov's Foundation, if you're familiar, is a good one. It has a lot of interesting concepts. It's a sci-fi piece from the late 60s, I think.
I'll check that one out. I haven't heard about
Yeah.
it.
I think there was an Apple TV series based on Foundation, but it wasn't particularly true to the story.
Ah, when you're not working at Prisma X, what are you doing for fun?
Still building robots, I think.
Bailey, absolute pleasure chatting with you. And I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
love to have you back on because I'm so fascinated by all this technology and the direction the world is heading in. But thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I love discussing frontier technology and how it will change the world, and I'm happy to always be on.